What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, we're going to talk about the most important player on this New York Giants football team, Daniel Jones. And yes, I know you guys are still recovering from yesterday's loss, as am I, but I'm going to have to push on. I'm going to continue to support this football team and continue to look for great things from Daniel Jones this season. I came out and said at the start of the year, I thought Daniel Jones would have a big progression this year with the pieces we've added to this football team. The most encouraging thing so far off of his performance, before I get into how he has performed, is the fact that this offense should not be clicking on all cylinders yet, right? Saquon Barkley, I think we all agree, still does not look like he's all the way back to form. Kenny Golladay and him still certainly don't have that great chemistry. Golladay only had 38 yards last night on 8 targets. Him and Shepard definitely look like they're working well. And he's had some crucial drops as well. Slayton's had 3 drops. That hasn't helped Daniel Jones out. The offensive line has at least been satisfactory. We'll see if they can hold up. Obviously, the injury to Nick Gates last night is not going to help Daniel Jones and this offense going forward. They're going to have to find a way to overcome it. And hopefully Billy Price can get the job done at the center spot. And I would only assume that Bredesen will be asked to play the guard, and they'll have 10 days to prepare for the Atlanta Falcons. And of course, a narrow loss last night, and we'll see how tough this team is. But I think we all agree that Daniel Jones is really the main guy we're looking at this year, because I think he's going to determine, regardless of what our record is, because say we win 6 or 7 games, but Jones is really good and the defense is a complete fluke, I don't think it's a rebuild. I think you continue to try to build this team up to support your good quarterback in Daniel Jones if he proves that he could take that big step forward. But we need to see it before we believe it. One thing that a lot of people say about Daniel Jones, and we'll get into, and by no means do I think he's a finished product. I need to continue to see growth with this quarterback. But one thing that a lot of people say about Daniel Jones is that he's very turnover prone. You know, after week 1, you saw it all over Twitter. People were going crazy about it. Oh, he's got 40 turnovers in 28 career starts or whatever it was. But nobody takes it into context. You could say that about Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning threw 28 interceptions. And by no means am I comparing Daniel Jones to Peyton Manning. I'm just using him as an example because he's an extreme example. And a guy that had turnover problems early on in his career. He led the league in interceptions in his first year. Never came close to doing that for the rest of his career. He progressed. You could only assume that quarterbacks are going to have more turnover problems earlier on in the year, early on in their career. You hope they learn from it. You hope that they grow. Eli Manning threw 9 interceptions in his first 7 career starts. We all know that Daniel Jones had severe fumbling problems in his rookie year. I believe he lost 11 fumbles. He threw 12 picks. I think he had 23 turnovers, if I'm not mistaken, in his first 12 starts. Got off to a really rocky start last year with the turnovers as well. But when you put it into context and you realize that, yes, quarterbacks could grow, Daniel Jones has 29 career starts. And I broke down the numbers today here. In Daniel Jones' first 21 starts, or his first 12 starts in his rookie year, and his next 9 starts in his sophomore season, he had 22 interceptions and 15 lost fumbles for 37 total turnovers in his first 21 starts, which is a ton. His last 8 starts, so a half a season's worth of games, including the first 2 this year and the last 6 last year, Daniel Jones has 1 interception. 1. So if he was able to maintain that over a 16-game season, which I don't think he will, that's very nearly impossible, he would only have 2 interceptions. He also has 3 lost fumbles. One of those fumbles was on a handoff, I believe, to Wayne Gallman. Another one, of course, was the fumble that was completely on him this year. And I think he had a blindside hit, if I'm not mistaken, maybe against the Arizona Cardinals, where he had another fumble. And his fumbling is still somewhat of an issue. It's not near what it once was, but I think it shows you when you put it in context. You're talking about 4 turnovers over his last 8 games, and the Evan Ingram interception was off both of Evan Ingram's hands, and then it landed in the defender's arms for an interception that really wasn't even Daniel Jones' fault, which is why Daniel Jones probably had as high of a PFF grade as he did last year, because it takes into account turnover-worthy plays. And a lot of the turnovers that Daniel Jones had weren't really his fault. That's why he had a grade of 78, which was much higher than his rookie year, even though in his rookie year he produced much better stats. He got lucky and probably should have had even more turnovers than what he had. So that's the first thing I'm going to say. When you look at the turnovers, I think that is overblown when it comes to Daniel Jones. I think now you're starting to get a sample size. He's only played 29 career starts. Well, about a third of those over his last 8 games, he's barely turned the ball over. He's had 1 interception. So he's definitely gotten better in that area. Yes, could you say that they played more conservative during that stretch? Sure. He was banged up a little bit for 2 of those games. But one thing you can't say is that they played conservative last night. And I'm going to break down the number for you guys. I'm going to tell you about this. I thought I pulled up the tweet. Last year, and we all know that this year the New York Giants offense has to create big plays. Last year, the Washington football team were the second-ranked defense in all of football. And we also the articles before the year started that people thought that Denver had the best secondary in football. So I thought going into the first two games, Jones and the offense would be very, very bland, very mediocre, and I just wanted them to not turn the football over. Well, last night, we saw more than just a conservative offense from Daniel Jones, and it was really encouraging. Like I said, last year, the Washington football team was second in overall defense. They only surrendered 36 20-plus yard plays all year, start to finish. And the Giants offense, ironically enough, only had 36 20-plus yard plays offensively all year. But the Washington football team gave up just over 2 20-plus yard plays per game on average last season. Their first game against the Chargers, even though the Chargers moved the ball, it was long, methodical drives. They only had 1 20-plus yard play against the Washington football team. Last night, Daniel Jones and the New York Giants had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 20-plus yard plays. 5. And it should have been 6 had Darius Slayton held on to the football. And when you think about that, that, of course, was not Daniel Jones' fault, even though you have people that will point to that and say that it was. That ball should have been caught. You have to absolutely lay out and make sure you hold that ball in if you're Darius Slayton. Jones was getting hit as he threw it. So if he catches that ball, Daniel Jones probably would have surpassed 300 yards passing. He would have had 2 passing touchdowns. He would have had 2 rushing touchdowns had C.J. Board not had that bogus hold at about the 15-yard line. And he would have had probably his greatest game of his career statistically. But when you factor in the defensive opponent and you factor in how well he played, it was really a very encouraging performance for the growth of Daniel Jones. And I think it's going to get some of the haters off of his back. Now he's got to continue this. He's got a soft team here in the Atlanta Falcons. He needs to build chemistry. He needs to keep building confidence and keep putting up numbers for this New York Giants offense. But I thought it was really good to see him and Jason Garrett open up this offense a bit last night and really try to stretch the field. They also drew some pass interference penalties as well. Now we're going to go over his stats so far this year. Last year, of course, 5-9. People look at the record. You can't just put the record on the quarterback. Everybody knows, anybody with a brain that watched the first 2 games this year, it goes a lot more in the defense than it does the offense. His QB rating, his completion percentage is already higher at 64%, even though in his first game, he had about a 59% completion percentage. And keep in mind, this is going against very good defenses with very little help from his defense. He didn't get short field position, none of that. So he's got his highest completion percentage so far this year. He's thrown for 516 yards, which on average is 258 yards a game. Last year, he only averaged 210 yards a game passing. So he's off to a really good start. Yes, only 2 touchdown passes, but he has 2 rushing touchdowns, and he could easily have 3 of each. Like I said, the board hold, the Darius Slayton catch against 2 of the best defenses that he has on the schedule this year. So a great start for Daniel Jones. Then when you look at his rushing stats, 122 yards rushing already with 2 rushing touchdowns. He's already surpassed his rushing touchdowns from last year, and he's on pace to run for like 1,000 yards. Not that I expect him to continue that pace, but they're definitely starting to use his legs a lot this year, as they should. And he's off to a great start. And when you look at the Washington team last year, Washington, over their last 7 regular season games, only surrendered 20 points as a high. They didn't surrender any more than 20 points in any of their last 7 regular season games last year. And their first game against Justin Herbert, the Chargers only put up 20 points. Well, if Darius Slayton holds onto the ball, Daniel Jones would have put up 36 points. And had they gone for it on 4th and 2 rather than kick the gimme field goal at one point in that game, it's possible he would have scored a touchdown and put up a 40 spot. So the Giants offense and Daniel Jones in general was really encouraging last night, and he overcame a lot. You know, you think about Nick Gates going down, you think about some of the calls by Garrett that kind of backed up drives when I think it was the reverse play to Sterling Shepard that backed us up 9 yards and made it a 2nd and 19. He overcame that. He found ways to overcome adversity, and we need to continue to see that as a fan base. But this year, to me, he is by far the most important piece, because even if we do only win 6 or 7 games, which obviously I don't want that to happen. I want to win 10 games. I want to win 15 games. If he shows that he could be a franchise or at least a potential franchise quarterback, it gives you hope for the future and something to build around. We need to find out what Daniel Jones is. I was happy to see that the New York Giants opened up the offense a lot last night, but in crucial spots, I continue to say it. Joe Judge cannot be so passive. He has to give Daniel Jones the opportunity to win or lose the football game. The other thing I wanted to pull up for you guys was this, his PFF rating. You know, I know a lot of people don't go by this, but I like to use it as a tool, just like anything else. This takes into account turnover-worthy plays, everything else like that. He's at 83.8 through 2 games, going up against 2 of the best defenses the sport has to offer. I think last year he was at a 78, but that includes a lot of bad defenses he went up against. You could only assume that it's possible that grade will go higher when he starts facing, easier defenses to go up against, like the Atlanta Falcons and the Dallas Cowboys. We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out, but Daniel Jones, to me, at least so far, has instilled a lot of confidence going forward throughout this year, but I need to continue to see it. Of course, I had a bold prediction at the beginning of the year that I thought he would throw for 30 touchdowns. I said, and in the live streams, I've kind of told you guys between 28 and 31. I still believe that. I never thought he'd have more than 1 or 2 touchdowns the first 2 weeks going against these defense with the unfamiliarity, with Kenny Golladay, with Saquon Barkley, who's not 100%. I think he starts to turn this offense up week 3 against the Atlanta Falcons, and let's hope that Daniel Jones could be the guy going forward. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.